This is The Baseline, discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Welcome, everybody. You are tuned to The Baseline. Callie Warrenshaw discussing the hot button topics of the NBA. Another jam-packed episode ready to be lined up for your listening pleasure. As always, man, we like to keep the hits coming, especially as we're coming down to the final stretch run of games of the regular NBA season. And it's about that time as well, too, for us to really start honing in on who is ultimately making those Ghost and Tommy power moves, those Kanan power moves in the NBA. Who are the best of the best right now, the creme de la creme? Who are those other teams shooting to, surpass, to be at the top of the pile when it's all said and done? So we cannot wait to have that kind of conversation. And we do have a guest who's going to help us lay it all out. As always, let me go ahead and roll out the red carpet to my right-hand man, www.shawsports.net, Big Kahuna PNC, my man, Mr. Warren Shaw, repping out of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. What's good, Mr. Shaw? I know it is a nice weekend, as is always down there in South Florida. We finally got sunshine up here in the northern eastern part of the country. So finally, we might actually get a glimpse of what spring may look like. You know what I'm saying? It's been touch and go a little bit.
I love that. Well,
the Knicks have been touch and go. You know what I'm saying?
Wow. I love that for you. As I say, hope springs eternal. So hopefully we'll continue to get some better weather in the New York and New Jersey areas. Yeah, it's lovely down here. I'm actually headed to a little food festival, after we record here today. So we're pretty excited about that. But I always love how you bring in pop culture references, brother. You know what I mean? The power thing. We got Raising Kanan coming back in a couple of weeks as well, too. So Baseline always on the cutting edge stuff of pop culture, brother. Thanks to you.
Absolutely, man. And listen, like they say, in order for us to pop out, we got to pop off. So,
Sometimes
anyway,
you have to pop out and show mode.
Yeah, exactly. I'm in my Kendrick feels, man, right now. You know what I'm saying? I just don't have that big chain that, you know what I'm saying? With the A. Can you imagine if I had a chain like that with the big C right there? You know what I'm saying? And you with the W would be fly for you, bro. You know what I'm saying? It would have a woo feel to it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yes.
Honorary member of the clan.
Oh man, I would love to be an honorary member. I think at one point we joked about what our Wu-Tang names would be. I can't remember what I came up with at the time, but we should kind of go back to that. Anyway, that's a conversation for another time. And we need to get Tyler and Jabari in and Dez in for the We Love Music series, and we got to get our hip hop going as well too, as always.
Yeah, man, absolutely. But in the meantime, to kind of whet the appetite a little bit, since you're going down to do your food festival, to whet the appetite a little bit, we're going to dish out flavors of who we think who we think the NBA's creme de la creme is going to be. And we have our special guest, Josh Rodriguez. He is a two-time Sports Podcast Award nominee. His podcast, The Dime, with Josh and Kawab, has been nominated twice by the Sports Podcasters Award, and he was gracious enough to be able to jump on board with us this week so we can have that real good discussion about who the top 5 NBA teams right now are, the Power 5. We'll also dig in a little bit to the fallout with the situation with Wemby and him not returning for the remainder of the regular season and what that might mean, not just for the Spurs, but just for the NBA in general. So we can't wait to get our man Josh on board to have those conversations. As always, we encourage everybody to tap in with us, my man Shaw at Shaw Sports NBA. You can get at me at Game Face Leader, show's Twitter at NBA Baseline. Remember, if you catch us on the blue and white logo, you know that we rocks with the 19 Media Group family. So if you see us on the YouTube channel, you see that blue and white logo. That's who you know who we ride with, the 19 Media Group family. We running these content streets. So you can always check us and the great family of content creators on www.19mediagroup.com. And as always, if you want to catch not just this episode, but all the episodes that the Baseline Archives has for your listening pleasure, for your ears, whenever you want to, you can always check us out at www.thebaselineNBA.com. So coming up, we got our man Josh who's going to hop on board for us so we can get into this week's conversations. But before we do that, I got to let you know, man, basketball season is heating up. So you know what that means. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money action while watching your favorite sports teams. You can now win up to 1,000 times your money on Prize Picks. Sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed when you use the promo code CLNS. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts and is available in more than 30 states, including California, Texas, Georgia, and Florida. Prize Picks is truly the best way to win real money with all the various opportunities to play and collect your winnings. Due to the enormous selection of players and stat types available, we can mix and match our playing strategies based on personal preferences. I might take Jason Tatum for more than 27 points and Drew Holiday for more than 2 steals to mix in some defense with my selections. Do you think Steph Curry will get more than 5 3-pointers next week or Giannis more than 35 points? Cook up hot takes with your friends and win real money this basketball season when you and your crew run your game on Prize Picks. And for those of you who love a quick win, Prize Picks is the way to go. You can make your picks and submit your entry in less than 60 seconds. So what are you waiting for? Download the app today and use the code CLNS. Once again, that's C as in Charlie, L as in Larry, N as in Nancy, S as in Sam, to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Remember, with Prize Picks is as simple as picking more or picking less. Again, the promo code is CLNS to get $50 after you play your first $5 lineup. The baseline is rocking with Prize Picks, and you should too. Prize Picks, run your game. Coming up, Josh Rodriguez joins us as we talk basketball, NBA, and power rankings. Don't go anywhere. Time now for the breakdown. Lee Warrenshaw, Baseline NBA podcast. And joining us this week, man, we're excited to have our man on board. We, as far as in the podcasting community and in the brotherhood, we always watch our peers from afar, but we also admire the work that they do. And it's always great when there's opportunity for collaborations to take place. And we're just really excited to have our man. He's a 2-time nominated Sports Podcast Award Group nominee, co-host of The Dime with Josh and Kawab. Our man, Josh Rodriguez, is joining us this week. What's good, my brother?
What's good, fellows? Thanks for having me on. Fellow nominees as well. So shout out to us. But thanks for having me on. You and what you guys are going on at 19 is awesome. So big respects, all that good stuff. I'm excited to be on. And you guys have to come on too, by the way.
Oh, absolutely.
I got to return the favor. Quab and I have to have you on. So let's make this happen.
Absolutely, man. It's just great when we're able, we all speak basketball, but what makes it unique is where it's coming from. Yeah. And you guys do a really great job of breaking down a lot more of the nuances of things that, other basketball podcasts don't get the opportunity to do, even ourselves. And I think that's what enriches people's appreciation for why the game is again, one of the more widely popular games that's out there, not just on the local level, but just even globally, man. So much respect to you and Kawab for continuing to do that. And that's the reason why we got you on here, because we want to definitely get your perspective on a couple of interesting things that have been taking place so far in the NBA. Well, one big thing that's really, I felt like was going to have an impact on where the conversation should go when we talk about where the NBA is regarding the fallout with Victor Wembanyama being out for the remainder of the season due to a serious medical condition, basically a blood clot in the shoulder. The San Antonio Spurs have decided to shut him down. And I know that an episode or so ago, Shaw and I, we had, a roundtable conversation about teams that, we should be watching for on part 2 of this regular NBA season. And obviously the San Antonio Spurs came up because they are somewhat within striking distance for that play-in spot. But I just wanted to get your perspective on it because I want to look at it more holistically. There's been so much weight put on Victor Wembanyama's shoulders as far as being the international face of the NBA, the future of the NBA and what he brings to the table. Is this legitimately of that big of a hit that the NBA is going to take not having Wemby in the picture or about the Spurs being in the picture, so to speak? Or are we going to be fine? I mean, with what we still have remaining on the table, with what to play for, are we going to be okay?
We'll be okay. I mean, as long as this is not a career-threatening injury, we're going to be fine. I mean, the truth of the matter is Wemby is a superstar. especially internationally. But the Spurs, they're like 10 games below 500. No one really predicts them to make a run to the playoffs or make any noise in the playoffs. I never heard anyone say, "Gotta watch the Spurs game tonight." Like, I don't think Wemby's at that point yet. I think you have a lot of basketball fans and basketball purists who love the game, who appreciate Wemby's game and will watch the Spurs to watch Wemby. And now that they got De'Aaron Fox, you kind of want to see how that plays out. But in the grand scheme of things for this year particularly, I don't think it's a big deal at all. Now, if there's more issues there and that blood clot can be career threatening and we don't know what that looks like going forward, then yeah, I think that's absolutely devastating. But for the short term, I don't think it's that big of a deal, if I'm being honest.
Josh, I want to tap into and also give you some more flowers because I know you're a producer as well too, working at Volume and doing some amazing things there too. So shouts to you and all the basketball ethos, all the content you've created, to our community.
Thanks,
but
man.
Also swinging back to the Spurs conversation. So we on this podcast were very pro get Wemby help now. Do you feel like if they would have known this was an injury, like this was going to take place, do you think they would have made the Fox move before the trade deadline, or would they would have maybe waited till after the summer, or does it just didn't make a difference one way or the other?
I think you get Fox. I think you get the talent when you can get the talent. I think De'Aaron Fox is a great match with Wemby. And if you have an opportunity to go get him, you go get him, period. I mean, he was disgruntled in Sacramento. There was word saying that he wanted out immediately. So you go get him. I don't think, especially if you think he's going to be there long term, right? Like if you think De'Aaron Fox is going to be there long term, he's going to sign an extension with you, then why not go get him? Why take the chance on another team going to get him, then making a playoff run, and then he falls in love with the city, and now you're looking for another point guard, right? If he's going to be there for the long term, it doesn't matter. Go get him. Let him get familiar with the coaching staff, with the other players as well. Maybe have some rapport with Castle. He's going to be somebody who's in the future, coming up in the future with the Spurs. So I think they did the right thing, no matter what the status was of Wemby.
Well, so I do find it an intriguing move, Josh, about the fact that they went after De'Aaron Fox, because I think they believe that combination of Fox and Wemby could be a force, right? Mm-hmm. I'm more so concerned. So, like, where does De'Aaron Fox fall when we talk about the point guard position? Is he a point guard or is he to be a two guard? And then now I think what adds a little bit more spice, I like to throw it in a little bit more zhoosh to the conversation, is the emergence of Stephon Castle, right? Like, I feel like there's a lot of shot taking, but will there be enough shot creating? And how long can you do that with Chris Paul as your point guard, whether he stays past the regular season or not? That was one of my concerns about De'Aaron Fox when he played with the Sacramento Kings, because I think ultimately for his growth, he wanted to be more aggressive, but his combination with him and Domantas Sabonis, I think, stymied that somewhat. So I'm not saying that he can't get along with bigs. I'm just saying there's a fine line that kind of comes to this. And I'm wondering, will Victor Wembanyama be the code that cracks that for De'Aaron Fox, or should he naturally be a two guard?
No, I think De'Aaron can run point. You can run pick and roll with Wemby. You can run pick and pop with Wemby. There's a lot of things you can do with Wemby. And the same could be said about Sabonis too. It's not like Sabonis was one-dimensional, but I do think, it depends on like who's next to you and the chemistry there. And I do think going forward, he's going to know it's Wemby's team. In Sacramento, it was De'Aaron Fox's team. Like, that was his team. He was number one option. He was the go-to guy. And I think when you come to the Spurs and you have someone like Wemby, you know that the ball is going to go to him and things are going to run through him, and you have to change up your game. If De'Aaron wants to play make, he can play make. We've seen him do it before. I just think it's a matter of his role on the squad, and I think his role changes in San Antonio. So I have a lot of confidence in De'Aaron Fox. I think the pick and roll would be perfect, getting him downhill, out in transition. I think he's going to thrive. I do think it's a good fit, and I think he can play point and actually distribute the basketball.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And I think as we're taking it back to Wemby, I mean, and even the Spurs themselves, there was some high notes of this season. Now this is clearly a lower note. And then I think Shams comes out and reports that Pop is probably not going to be back, this season as well, too, after suffering the stroke. Your thoughts on that impact on Wemby's overall trajectory? So the injury is one thing, right? And now they've had to get used to, a kind of the secondary coach Pop into that space, but if Pop isn't back, do you think that impacts the way Wemby's able to develop as he comes back from this blood clot?
Yeah, I mean, Pop's one of the best coaches of all time, right? So if you don't have one of the best coaches of all time, that's gonna impact you somehow. But I do think he's had a good year with the interim coach. I do think that he's grown this year. He's getting better. And honestly, it's one of those things too. Like you hear people talk about Phil Jackson and Eric Spoelstra and all these great coaches, but they needed great players too. Pop needed great players. I don't know if we're sitting here talking about Pop if you didn't have Tim Duncan and Tony Parker and Manny Ginobili. And it's not to say he's not a great coach, but you need the players. And from what I've seen from Wendy this year, he's developed. His game has grown. I'm not worried about it at all. I think his talent's too good to be held back. And I think the Spurs are going to be fine no matter who the coach is, as long as it's a competent coach, obviously.
It's interesting what you just alluded to, Josh, because it's not so much that it's a concern to me, but it's something that I want to keep my eye on, because to your point, Gregg Popovich is among one of the, is arguably the GOAT, right? You can have arguments about that. Yeah. But one of the things I've often appreciated about Gregg Popovich, which I didn't see in his first iteration when he had David Robinson and Tim Duncan, but it was post David Robinson, was that he realized that he had to evolve. And he had to do it basically 2 iterations, which allowed the Spurs to basically be a dynasty for almost 20 years, literally, right? He evolved in the way that he implemented and how he utilized his veterans and how he brought along Kawhi Leonard and everybody like that. Maybe people thought he was crazy for doing it, but now we're beginning to understand the method to his madness. The thing that I think that gets me in the part that Warren was alluding to is part of what Popovich was able to get the veteran guys to do is to buy into doing something that they may not have been comfortable doing for the greater good of elite level basketball play. And I wonder, with the dominance that's already come into play with Victor Wembanyama, does that buy-in come from a Mitch Johnson, or will it really be leaned on by what Gregg Popovich says and his unavailability can impact that mindset, that mentality? Because now it's more about Wembanyama figuring out on his own if it's not coming from Mitch Johnson. Now, I just wanted to get your perspective from that, if I'm often thinking that in that regard.
No, I think it's a great counterpoint. I think it's a fantastic counterpoint, right? Like it's going to hit different coming from Mitch than it is from Gregg Popovich, period. Like if Gregg Popovich asks you to sacrifice, you're going to sacrifice, period. I think that's a great counterpoint that you just mentioned.
I think part of it is because I haven't heard much about Mitch Johnson. I know he's been a part of the staff, but a lot of the staff that Popovich has had over the last 5 years leading into have all gone off to do different things. Like Becky Hammond is no longer there. And she's the kind of person that I think helped bridge the gap in where that developmental stage is, where the IQ level of how the game needs to be played. I'm just wondering, is there enough voices that are going to be available there when the time comes that everybody is now back on board, fully healthy? We're hitting the reset button for 2025, 26, and we need to see this version of Wembanyama. Because you're already hearing the conversations about Wemby. He's taking too many threes. It doesn't look like he's like establishing himself down in the paint, the post, or whatever the case may be. And you're saying to yourself, would Popovich be up in his ear saying something to him like that? You know what I'm saying? Or is that Wemby now going to figure that part of it out?
Yeah, I think that's a concern. I think that's, a valid counterpoint. Again, like I don't know what type of coach Mitch is yet. I don't think we know, but I do know they responded well to him. Like he took over the head coaching position and they started playing well. Like they were not playing well until he took over, really. They played better with Mitch. And I'm not saying that's an indictment on Popovich, but I do think it actually shows that like there's a culture there in San Antonio where they do respect the coaching staff and they do listen to the coaching staff. And, I don't know much about the relationship that Wemby and Mitch has. Maybe they formed their own relationship where like how Tim grew up with Gregg. Well, maybe now Wemby grows up with Mitch. I don't know the answer to that, but I do know that there is a culture there in San Antonio that Gregg has built that even if his presence is not in the building, I do think it does seep through, and the players and the coaching staff do form around that culture. I am confident in that. I don't think the franchise just kind of like flips on its head and then all of a sudden it's like chaos. I do think that they will keep that culture. Maybe Mitch is not Gregg Popovich, but the idea of San Antonio Spurs basketball and having respect for your coach and doing things the right way stays intact.
Josh, my last one for this, and something I've been wrestling with since the news broke, because I agree with you what you said earlier. I think you get Fox because you want to start to build. You want to have him into the system, exactly what you're just talking about. What is the Spurs system like? How does he learn the offensive rotation, the defensive rotation, and schemes of this? But Wemby not being there means like their season is toast. It's a wrap. It's Rap City. It's done. Yeah. So do you throttle down, if you're the general manager of this team, do you throttle down Chris Paul, Harrison Barnes? You start getting some random rest days. You might be doing some more weirdness with Sohan at point guard or center or stuff like that as well, too. Because you could tank out. There's a possibility you could end up in the Cooper Flagg sweepstakes. It's a long shot, but is that something that you would do now, as the Spurs, as their season is obviously lost without Wemby in the lineup?
Yeah, I don't think I necessarily tank, but I do think you play around with lineups, especially with lineups you think are going to be part of your future. Shohan, Vassell, Stephon Castle, De'Aaron Fox, run different sets, run different lineups out there, see who De'Aaron works well with, see who he doesn't work well with, see what lineups work. I think you do things like that. I don't think it's a lost season, but I do think having someone out there like Harrison Barnes doesn't do you any good, right? I think Chris Paul does you good because he can organize things on the court. You can learn from him by just playing the game with him. So I don't think that's necessarily bad, but I do think they should take the direction of, testing out lineups and seeing who works well with who.
You're tuned to The Baseline. Callie, Warren Shaw, and our special guest, Josh Rodriguez of The Dime with Josh and Quab. Coming up, we are getting into our Power 5 rankings. It's only fitting, right? One of us has got to be Ghost. One of us has got to be Tommy. The other one's got to be Kanan. Well, either way, the top 5 is going to be live. It's going to be lit. So you do not want to miss out on this. More Baseline, Callie, Warren Shaw. Don't go anywhere. We are back, Callie, Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA podcast, and our special guest, Josh Rodriguez of The Dime, 2-time nominated sports podcast, Best Basketball Podcast Award nominee, The Dime with Josh and Kawab. So let's get right into it, man. Let's do the Power 5. I'm sorry. I'm going to say this on as we were recording, Shaw. My apologies. I did not mean to make it sound like the only people that we should be talking about are the people that died.
Just saying.
They were the main
if you follow the series, Ghost and Kanan, but Raising Kanan is coming back out. So, you can resurrect.
Okay. Would you have preferred if I go with The Wire? I'm sure that there's at least a couple people that were still in the game, still alive. I'm
not really, but yeah, they all died too. But it is one of the best shows out there.
Stringer, right?
Okay.
Anyway, let's get right into it. Josh, hit us off with your Power 5 ranking.
All right, so my Power 5, in at number 5, I do have the New York Knicks, and it's not because I think the Knicks are that good. I just don't believe in the Rockets. I don't believe in the Grizzlies. Right now, to be determined with the Lakers, even though they did beat the Nuggets last night very impressively. It's more out of just like a process of elimination. I don't think
somebody's got to be there.
Yeah, I'm a Knicks fan. I love the Knicks. They're fugazi. They are fugazi this year. They are going nowhere. The Knicks are 0-6, about to be 0-7 against the top 3 teams in the league. They're playing the Celtics right now, and they're down $1 million. They're just not. They're not contenders whatsoever. It's just that I feel like this type of year, there aren't really too many contenders, and therefore they just, by process of elimination, come in at number 5.
Well, I mean, but you don't believe in the idea that, you lose enough times, you may have actually figured out the division.
No, I don't believe that.
Matters the most.
I don't. I think when you play the Boston Celtics 3 times and they run you off the floor. Yeah, when you play the Boston Celtics 3 times and they run you off the floor, that team is better than you. You're not beating that team 4 times. It's not happening. So, yeah, I got the Knicks at number 5.
All right, number 4.
Number 4, I got the Denver Nuggets. I know they lost to the Lakers last night. I think the Lakers particularly are a bad matchup for them. I don't think, just looking ahead, they might have problems and issues guarding the Lakers specifically, but I do think they're the second best team overall in the Western Conference. They think they need to tighten up on the defensive end, but Jokic is still the best player in the world to me, in my opinion. They've been really hot as of late, even though they did lose last night. They've been playing really good basketball. And they're the one team that I think can be a dark horse to win the NBA championship.
All right. Legit. Any feedback, Shaw? No,
we want to keep rocking. I want to hear everything. I'm gonna jump in after that.
All right. Number 3, Josh.
Number 3, I do have the Cavs. They did go through a little bit of a valley. There's peaks and valleys in the season. They kind of just came out of theirs. I think they're for real. I do think they can beat the Boston Celtics in a 7-game series. I do think they can win the NBA championship. They're one of 3 teams that I do think can win the NBA championship. Evan Mobley's ascension this year is real. Kenny Atkinson and how he's working that offense, a lot of pick and rolls and actions off of the pick and roll. They're running more. They used to be one of the slowest paced teams in the league, and I don't know why. And now they've picked up the pace. They have a fantastic bench. They play good defense. The Cavs are for real. They're for real. They were number 1 in our power rankings for a while until they kind of slipped a little bit, but I'm comfortable putting them at number 3.
All right. Who do you have as number 2?
2, I have the Boston Celtics for now. They've been playing really well. But I just think the team I have at number 1 has just been outrageous. So I'll have them at number 2. I think they're the best team in the East. I think when push comes to shove, and you have everybody out there who's healthy for the Boston Celtics, I just think they're just too much to handle. They out-math you with the 3. They have players who can go one-on-one and go at you. Peyton Pritchard is probably going to be 6th man of the year. And I just think, they're champs for a reason. I just think, maybe during the season, you're kind of taking a couple games off and just the regular season doesn't matter anymore.
All right. So I don't know. Should we be surprised on who your number 1 is?
No. It's OKC. And most of it is because defensively they can just turn up. Point of attack defense on the perimeter is some of the best I've ever seen in my life, personally. Whenever they want to turn it on and they can switch to zone. I just think defensively, when you're that good defensively, you have room for error on the offensive end. And even though, you have SGA, I think sometimes they are prone to some cold spells, but when you're that good defensively and you can turn it up and you can shut out a team for like half of a quarter, like they did against the Heat and went on a 20-something-0 run, you're really freaking good. So I like the Thunder. Come playoff time, I don't know what that's going to look like, but right now, to me, they're the best team in the league.
All right. Top 5. Woo. It's a nice list.
Yeah, I like Josh's list.
Stay alive with that list, Josh. I don't think you're going to get capped at the end of this episode.
I hope not.
Okay. All right, Shaw. Hit us off with your top 5.
All right, so I won't go into too much explanation so we can, get into the overall conversation. But just for dissension purposes, I'm going to go against Josh with the Knicks here in 5, and I would have put them there, but I'm going to go with Memphis only for the sake of I think the Grizzlies have more to give. Ja's not having an amazing season. And I don't know if he's kind of saving himself for what will be an eventual playoff run here too. But the Grizzlies are extremely deeper than I thought they were going to be this year. So I'm going to give them a slight edge because they're a little bit deeper than obviously the New York Knicks team. From here on else, I'm more or less in line with what Josh has to say. I got the Nuggets at 4. I got the Celtics actually at 3. I got the Cavs at 2, and I got the Thunder at 1. And I'll get into some of those conversations in a little bit, especially, with my beloved Celtics, where I'm just a little concerned with the Cavs additions and what they were able to do. Not so much about the Javonte Green situation, but the DeAndre Hunter. I don't like that. I don't like that if I'm a Celtics fan. So the Cavs really, really are starting to put a little bit of a stink, and a little fear in me if I'm a Boston Celtics fan. So that's my power 5. See what you got, brother.
All right, so my power 5 goes the way of maybe I'm the one who's going to get capped by the end of this conversation. But the way I have this set up is I have the Memphis Grizzlies in at number 5. Much to everybody's point and to your point, Shaw, I just feel like there's that Ja Morant factor that I just think plays so heavily on where this team can possibly go to. But the fact that they are just this deep with a marginally good Ja Morant spells trouble. I went a little bit different here. My number 4 team I have is the Houston Rockets. I understand that this team has its highs and lows, but I'm thinking, and I stood on this because I spoke about how I think this team's going to wind up being the 2 seed in the Western Conference by the end of this season, over the Grizzlies and over the Denver Nuggets. I just think that the Rockets, man, there's just something about this team. I can't put my finger on it, but everything just points to the idea that you just do not want to mess with this team this time around. I don't think that they blow the opportunity to chance if they see themselves being a higher seed. So I have to put them in there in that conversation. And then the Cavs I have as number 3. I have the Celtics as number 2, and number 1 I have as the Oklahoma City Thunder. It's kind of interesting what you guys are saying, and Josh, I'll have you weigh in on this part of it, because the reason why I have the Boston Celtics is I still see the Boston Celtics collectively being one of the better versatile defensive teams that are out there. Now, at times they don't play like it, but I don't necessarily worry about when they're not playing like it, when you don't have the personnel to play like it. When they're just not playing like it, they don't look like a great team, and then they can be had. But when they do have the personnel, and we're only questioning that they just didn't do it tonight, and we're now talking about this happening over a 7-game series, it's a little bit more of why I was on the fence between saying, should the Cavs be number 2 or should the Celtics be number 2? And that, to me, I think is where it becomes very intriguing. Right now, Oklahoma City is in a class by itself. But I was wondering where your perspective is on that. When we talk about that 2-3 seed of our power rankings, respectively, between all of us, is it that we should worry more about the Celtics not dominantly being that solid 2, and they could easily fall down to any of those other teams below them, or that we should be more confident about the Celtics and what they're doing?
Yeah, it's weird. I go back and forth about both. There's days where I'm like, it's the Celtics. They're going to be fine. I'm not worried about them whatsoever. Like today, when they're beating the crap out of the Knicks, they're fine. And there's other but then there's times like I watch the Cleveland Cavaliers play and I'm like, this team is good. And it has nothing to do with what I think about Boston. It has everything to do with how I feel about Cleveland. Cleveland is really freaking good. And even though the Celtics are really good, Cleveland can beat them. Now, the Celtics are 2-1 against the Cavs, but I do think that in a 7-game series, I do think it's a toss-up. I think Cleveland can win that series. I just trust Boston more because I've seen Boston do it, right? And that's been the knock on the Cavs, where it's like this team has been together. We see them in the playoffs. And even though like Atkinson has brought in a new system and they're deeper and Mobley's better, we still haven't seen it from the Cavs. And I think that's what prevents
we could be doing the same thing about the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? But
you're
it's
right.
The level of dominance, the way that the Oklahoma City Thunder team is exhibited. And I'll also chalk it up to this, and Shaw, you can weigh in on this part of it. When I saw the Oklahoma City Thunder take that L against the Cleveland Cavaliers in their first matchup at Cleveland, and then they had the return matchup back at OKC, and OKC layeth the smacketh down on the Cleveland Cavaliers, it brought me back to earth more about the Cleveland Cavaliers, more so than me speaking about the Oklahoma City Thunder and what I needed to worry about regarding the Boston Celtics. That to me is, now I'm looking at, all right, so the Boston Celtics play the Oklahoma City Thunder. Does the Oklahoma City Thunder trample, trounce, dominate? Or will we see more of that matchup that I think we're all hoping to see for all of those teams?
Yeah, interesting assessment, I think, because I'm with you with OKC's second matchup against Cleveland. I took more from that than the first one, where it was relatively close and then Cleveland kind of pulled away. But when they just had no regard for human life, against them the second time, I was like, yeah, this is a team that you should be very, very fearful of, despite what I know Windhorst and guys like that are saying, nobody fears OKC. Well, that's your bad, right? Because I think this is a team that can truly lock you down and give you a nightmare, as we saw when the Celtics played them, especially in that second half, in the season. They just shut them down, and then OKC beat up on the Knicks twice. And it's just, this is a team. Sorry, Josh. This is just okay.
We really did not bring you on this show to trample the Knicks.
It's fine. I mean, the Knicks deserve it. The Knicks deserve it. They've been awful against the best teams in the league.
No, but ultimately, and the fact that they did most of this for the majority of the season without Holmgren in the lineup, and now they get him back as well too. And he's still kind of figuring some things out. The addition of Hartenstein was obviously a masterstroke, by Sam Presti and others. This OKC Thunder team is a juggernaut. The team that, I guess, for whatever reason was their kryptonite was the Dallas Mavs, and then they dismantled how the Mavs are actually going to be functioning this year. So why would you not pick OKC to be the dominant team in this? But Josh, before you jump back in, I'm going to tap this back over to UCL, because interestingly enough, you do not have the Denver Nuggets in this situation. I mean, the Rockets is fine choice, but to have Denver out, I need you to explain that, especially with them winners of 9 and 10. I know you don't want to be a prisoner of the moment, but they look like a team that should be reckoned with here. What left you Denver out of your top 5?
Because I'm not confident about Denver's defense. That is my big. See, Shaw knows this. Josh, you will come to know this when we bring you on. We're saying we're on your podcast. Shaw knows me. I am a staunch believer. Defense wins championships. Now, we can talk about all of the offensive numbers we want to, but when it really comes down to it, I need to know on whose side of the basketball that you got that's going to stop the other team's best players or whatever they got on their roster. And when I look at this Denver Nuggets team, this team defensively does not feel like the team that won the championship 2 years ago. It just simply doesn't. You had Contavious Caldwell-Pope. You had Jeffrey. You had a number of guys where you're not talking about their offensive numbers, but you were definitely talking about a couple of hustle plays and stops that they have been starving to get from any of their players, even their role players like Christian Braun, who had signs of it at the beginning of the year and is now tapered off from doing it. Aaron Gordon has been in and out of the starting lineup. He is the sole reason why we even talked about the Denver Nuggets have like this trifecta of Murray, Jokic, and Gordon collectively, because what Gordon was able to do defensively the last couple of years, we're not seeing that from him. And I'm not putting this on identifying any specific reason. I think what I'm honing in more on is the Denver Nuggets can very much be a dangerous team when they're clicking offensively, but when they're needing to stop the better teams in the NBA, so teams like the Oklahoma City Thunder, if the Memphis Grizzlies, when they're on one offensively, and I'll even say the Houston Rockets, when Jalen Green and Sengun and those guys start, Amin Thompson, when they all start getting off, I don't see with the same level of confidence the Denver Nuggets stopping those star guys. And I think that's the reason I have more upside on the Rockets defensively and the Grizzlies defensively than I do. And a perfect example of that was just the other night when the Nuggets lost to the Los Angeles Lakers. It wasn't the fact that I'm saying that the Los Angeles Lakers are this great team. I've always said the Lakers are going to be in the mix. I had them predicted to be a part of the picture. But how they are letting the Lakers just do what they want, shooting the three ball. To me, it was a masterclass in asking Mike Malone, say, you going to make adjustments? You going to make adjustments? Right? You know what I'm saying? Austin Reeves has shot 3 threes in a row. You going to make adjustments? Dalton Knecht is just camping out, shooting threes. The Denver Nuggets refuses to change their MO on how they play defensively. And I feel like that's what's going to cost this team from me believing that they're a power team.
So I love the explanation there, right? So I'm going to kick it to you, Josh, now as well, too. So do you have the same level of faith in Houston? Because my problem with Houston is as great as they are defensively is as poor as they are offensively. Like I don't trust them offensively in the least bit. So where do you have this Rockets in this mix? Were they 6 for you? With 7 potentially? Where do you see the Rockets and Cal's pick there?
So Quab and I do a power rankings every week. We have the Rockets at 7. We had them at 2 at one point. Like they were up there for a little bit.
Yeah.
They're fantastic defensively. My problem with Houston is it's offensively in the half court when the game slows down. They don't really shoot the three well, even when they get open shots.
And they don't seem to, Josh, real quick, they don't seem to know who they want their go-to guy to be.
Right.
And I think while Fred VanVleet is not on that floor, I feel like they're going to continue to have those problems. There's a couple of guys I would love to see have that ball when they get into those kind of sets.
Yeah.
But I'm not Ime Udoka. And
no,
so I don't want to be in that. I don't want to be that. I don't want to get in trouble.
And it's interesting because going into the year and for the longest time, I was like, this offense needs to run through Şengün. But the longer that Fred stays out, the more I'm like, oh no, like this has to go through Fred. Like Fred has to be making decisions. And they are way better on the floor when Fred VanVleet is running that offense offensively. Now they can do different things. And the problem again is not them getting open shots. It's they can't hit open shots most of the time. And I think that's going to be their undoing. So although I do like Houston, I think they're a team of the future. I love them. Like Amin Thompson's one of my favorite players. He's become one of my favorite players in the league. Jalen Green's hit or miss. I just don't trust them to be consistent enough offensively to be taken seriously as a threat.
It's a hit or miss league, baby.
It is, but I mean, if you're gonna tell me it comes down to like who's gonna get a stop late in games between, like I know the Nuggets are not good defensively, like they're at best mediocre, but Nuggets Rockets. I'm gonna take like I'll take my chances with Jokic figuring it out against the Houston Rockets, defense than the Houston Rockets offense figuring out.
I just think in a time where we're sitting on our analytics and our logic, the logic says it should be the Nuggets and it should be the Grizzlies, no question. Hell, it could probably be the Nuggets, it could be the Knicks, and the Knicks and the Grizzlies can duke it out if we're talking about 5. But I'm just going by what I've been seeing over the last couple of years on these runs for teams that are on the lower side of quote unquote people's power rankings that are making these tremendous runs with the rosters that they've got. And I feel like the closest representation of that has been a team like, say, the Houston Rockets. More so, we don't get that from the Memphis Grizzlies. It could have been the Memphis Grizzlies, but during those times, Morant has been unavailable. The team has been thoroughly decimated with injuries. So maybe this year it should be the Grizzlies that are in that conversation to do that with more confidence. I'm just leaning more on the fact that it's the Rockets and it's just an Ime Udoka thing. I don't know what it is.
I mean, he's one of the best coaches in the league. And with me, my problem with the Grizzlies is they turn the ball over a lot and their offense is really not imaginative. Like I know like analytics say that they're one of, if not the best offense in the league, but they don't run a lot of pick and rolls. There's not a lot of action in the half court. It's basically give the ball to Ja, give the ball to Jaren, go at your guy.
Sean
And picking up the pace and shooting quickly.
And Sean knows how I feel about Jaren.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? JJ, he could be Kid Dynamite when he actually realizes that he's damn near 7 foot tall.
Right. He loves chilling out in the three-point range and shooting threes and taking his man off the dribble, which he can do sometimes. But it's just a little bit of an awkward offense for me where, again, playoffs, the game slows down. You get into the half court. To me, I'm very comfortable with a team like the Nuggets who have different actions in the half court where they can, run a pick and roll, run a dribble handoff. They're cutting. Like it's just completely different to guard in the playoffs. I think the Grizzlies are too predictable in the half court. And I think the Rockets just don't have enough shooting in the half court. And I do agree with you. Like a big reason why I loved last year's Knicks team was because they got on the offensive glass. They were hustling and they got extra possessions and they played defense. Like I was a huge believer in last year's Knicks team before everybody got hurt. But at the same time, you got to be able to hit shots. You have to. And I just don't trust the Rockets to do so. And I don't trust the Grizzlies half-court offense to be creative enough to even get past a team like Denver, who's going to probably score on you on the way down in the half-court.
Well, we were talking about this before we started recording the show, Josh. I would love to see the New York Knicks be as dominant as I think everyone expects them to be. And the biggest problem that I have with what has happened, and again, this is a matter of the team basically getting into a comfort level of being used to each other and executing through each other and with each other, and to kind of nix that at the expense of getting a Karl-Anthony Towns. I completely get it. Karl-Anthony Towns, monster year, and you can make the arguments that he could be an MVP, no question, right? But wasn't just a year ago we were having that same conversation about Jalen Brunson? You know what I mean? Like, to me, I thought that for the Knicks, you're putting way too much on Jalen Brunson too soon. Jalen Brunson is that guy, right? Like, I honestly feel like for the Knicks to get far, we'll see how this plays out. But if you're talking about the Knicks actually getting to the Eastern Conference Finals, it's got to be through Brunson. I know that the matchups say that it's about Karl-Anthony Towns and what he's capable of doing, but I think that the Jalen Brunson that we saw last year on another level with what you've got around him, they got to go through him. And if he is not 100, if he's not 100% right, when I say that, I mean, you're putting the burden on him to execute for everybody else, to put everybody else in the best position possible to get theirs before he gets his. You do a disservice to the Knicks' opportunity of possibly getting to the Eastern Conference Finals or possibly getting to the NBA Finals. Because I thought that was what you had realized when you brought him in and you saw what he was capable of doing. And it's not to say he can't do that with Karl-Anthony Towns. I'm just saying so much of the focus is about how great Karl-Anthony Towns is now that he's a New York Knick and he's playing next to Jalen Brunson. But it's almost like we've completely forgotten Jalen Brunson had to be that guy too, right? And he's not been that guy.
No, yeah. And I think Jalen will be that guy in the playoffs. I do think they're going to lean on him the most. For me, the problem with the Knicks is just defensively. They bring Cat out in the perimeter. If they switch on the pick and rolls, he can't guard anyone on the perimeter. He drops too far in drop coverage. He doesn't really contest well. But I do agree with you where, like, if they don't run the offense through Brunson, they're going to get lost in the playoffs. And he is the man that the Knicks need to go through in the playoffs. And there has been, I wouldn't say some type of confusion, but this team still hasn't really found their identity. Like, analytics say that the offense has been really good. When I watch this Knicks team, like, I don't know who they are, really. There's really not something that they do incredibly well. Like, in my mind, at least, I think it's hot and cold. Like, they were running out in transition for a couple of weeks and looked like they were a team that all of a sudden, like, oh, if they get out and run, they're going to be good. And then they stopped doing that. They were good with the pick and roll with Cat, and then they stopped doing that. And it's just kind of like, I don't know what this team is. So for me, like, there's bigger problems, especially with their defensive identity.
I want to kind of steer this conversation slightly differently, and just kind of pick all y'all's brain. And in terms of the 5 that you selected, a lot of this is about talent. And a lot of it is about coaching, how that coach utilizes said talent and said bench. So if you had to reshuffle this in any way, who do you think the best 5 coaches are, in your group specifically, or would it be exactly the same?
In our groups that we did specifically, like in the 5 that I chose?
Yep.
Yeah. That's a great question. Holy crap. I don't know.
I'm gonna say this. I'll do this. I started off, Josh. I'll give you a small reprieve. So, Shaw, you're gonna come in after on this one.
Sure.
So here's where I am with it when it comes to the coaching. In 5, I have Kenny Atkinson and the Cavs. In 4, I have Taylor Jenkins and the Grizz. In 3, I have Daigneault and the Oklahoma City Thunder. In 2, I have Udoka and the Rockets, and in 1, I've got Mazzulla with the Celtics. So here's the thing.
From your 5,
yep. Yeah, here's the thing. I would easily have Kenny Atkinson up there. My concern with Atkinson, and I think we're going to see this in the playoffs, is how is he going to tap in to his star players in critical situations and critical moments, right? Like you've got Mitchell, and at times he's got to be the person to say, Mitchell, I need you to back off on this. This is Mobley time. You see what I'm saying? I don't know if I've seen that yet with Atkinson. Atkinson has he develops guys and he brings them to a certain level. Now, when you get to this level, is he really tapping in to his players, his stars, and setting up the offenses the way that it needs to be set up so those guys can thoroughly shine when it matters the most? In a closeout game, in a game where you could basically dominate the series and things of that nature, I don't have as high a confidence just yet in Kenny Atkinson because I haven't seen him do it. He's been an assistant coach to it, but to say to be a head coach to it, don't know. The Udoka-Mazzulla dynamic, to me, what I love about it is if Udoka had this version of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, I think they would have waxed the Golden State Warriors in that NBA Finals. But he didn't have those versions of them in that time, and he didn't have the kind of roster that Mazzulla has. But the one thing that I will give Mazzulla that Udoka, to me, falls short on, Mazzulla leans so much into what his offenses do great. He's like, you guys want to shoot the 3? I'm going to give you everything possible for you to go do that. But if you go do it, you need to do it at the highest level. Don't half-ass it. You need to do it at the highest level. And I've seen that he's learned from his mistakes on how he leans in on his guys to go out there and execute. So that's why I probably put Mazzulla over Udoka, not just because of the championship, but I've seen the evolution of Mazzulla making the adjustments with the roster that he has to see the level of dominance over a great sample size as to why we still say the Celtics are going to be a team to beat no matter whether we like it or not.
So from my 5, and I love what you said there, I would challenge it only on the aspect of because Udoka leans so heavily into the defense while Mazzulla is not as defensive minded, but is still, he figured out a way. And I as much as I was down on Mazzulla, especially in that first year, but he figured out a way to get Tatum and Brown to sacrifice. And maybe Udoka would have gotten there. Maybe he would have gotten there, but it would have looked very, very differently because of the disciplinarian that he is. So, and it's so interesting because what I like in Cleveland right now is I'm seeing a lot of that. You're seeing Donovan Mitchell where like, hey, I don't need to be the guy to get you 30 a night. I needed the guys to expand here, especially in Mobley. So the sacrifice I'm seeing in Cleveland is very much what I saw from Boston last year. And that's why it gives me Cavs gives me a little bit more oomph in terms of their edge, if you will. But in terms of the coaching conversation, I do have Taylor Jenkins, as in the 5th in my rankings. I'm going to put Daigneault 4th, and not because I don't respect him. It's just, somebody's got to go there. I'm going to put.
I've yet to see Daigneault, Shaw. I've yet to see Daigneault really show me his chops. I'm not saying that he's riding on the coattails of the greatness of the talent he has, but I'll be very interested to see this iteration of the Oklahoma City Thunder where he does, because he is going to have his imprint on their run. He's gonna have to, and I don't want to have another year of me questioning not the innovativeness of what he has on his talent and how he's getting those guys to play, but his imprint on how he is extracting it when it needs to happen. Because we don't want to have this conversation again about the Oklahoma City Thunder being a number 1 seed and getting knocked out in the first round just because they had a bad matchup. They literally should have all of the, I's dotted, right? Literally on what they need and what they should have going into the playoffs that's going to allow them to make this championship run.
Yeah. So again, no disrespect. No, he's coach of the year and so forth and so forth. So I'm not throwing that under the bus in any way, but he's an amazing guy. I'm actually going to put Atkinson third. I think there's the aspect of just he's coached before. He, refused the job to come to take the right job. I just like him as an individual. I think he's, especially thinking about what he did with those Brooklyn teams previously as well. I'm going to put Mazzulla too. Again, he's coming off a championship, after he learned a lot in that first year. And I know the Nuggets are not even in Cal's group, and they are, kind of, I would say, the sleeper of this group, so to speak. But Michael Malone, he's cognizant of this defense. And I think in a lot of ways, too, what we're not giving him credit for is that this Nuggets team looked like crap in the preseason, started the season off really rough. They reinvented, figured it out. Then they went through another stretch. He figured out again, got Russ in the starting lineup. Now he's bringing Russ back off the bench. And if you listen to the ABC broadcast from the Lakers game, Malone is very cognizant of what the defensive struggles are. It's not like he's not aware. So I think he's going to figure some of those things out and how can I maximize this team with what it does best? And can we do what I always talk about, situational defense? If I can't be amazing for all 48 minutes, in the last 5 minutes in a clutch game, can I figure out ways and schemes to lock in? So I think if I were going from that line, he would be the best coach of my Power Five. Josh, a lot of conversation here. Where you got now?
All right. So for me, for my list at 5, I do have Dagnall. I mean, last year against the Mavs when they lost, my biggest problem with OKC in the offense was that they really didn't do anything to adjust the way the Mavs were playing against them. And I know it was Mark's first year. You get a pass for that. But this year, you were the best team in the league. And I'm looking forward to see what he does going forward. But I don't know what that looks like. In at number 4, I do have Thibodeau. Now, I like Tibbs, but last year, I kind of have a gripe with him because I don't think he made enough adjustments last year against the Pacers. I know that the Knicks were hurt. I know that they were down a lot of guys, but the Pacers got whatever they wanted on the offensive end against the Knicks last year, and the Knicks were known as a defensive team, and I just don't think Tibbs made any adjustments last year as far as maybe trying to figure out how to trap Halliburton or different schemes to kind of get them off balance. In games 6 and 7, they got whatever they wanted. The Pacers got whatever they wanted. And it just kind of soured me on Tibbs because he has this reputation of you could only take a team so far. And last year kind of felt like that was he lived up to his reputation. Number 3, I have Atkinson. I love Kenny Atkinson. He would probably be higher on this list if he actually has some success in the playoffs, but he doesn't. I think what happened to him in Brooklyn was an absolute injustice. And I do think if he stayed in Brooklyn, that team could have won an NBA championship, maybe multiple championships, barring injury and vaccinations or whatever it is. That team would have been really good with Kenny Atkinson at the helm. I do understand your concerns, though, about letting his superstars cook in the playoffs and seeing what he does from there. But I just think what he's been able to bring to Cleveland as far as offensive sets, unlocking Mobley, utilizing his bench, picking up the pace. It's everything he did in Brooklyn with a lesser roster, essentially. And I think he's a fantastic coach. He just needs the credentials to actually be put up in the tier with my number 2, Mazzulla, who, has won a championship with the Boston Celtics. It's hard for me to put Mazzulla over Malone because Mazzulla inherited a team that went to the NBA Finals and was 2 games away from beating Steph Curry and the Golden State Warriors. So although I do think he's a good coach, I do think he got gifted a very good situation. He's also psychotic. And at number 1, I got Michael Malone. I'm with Warren here. I do think he's very aware of Denver's deficiencies on defense. I don't think it has anything to do with him specifically. Yesterday against the Lakers, they tried, they tried trapping. They couldn't guard the pick and roll. And that's their biggest problem is Jokic in the pick and roll. How do you guard that? And sometimes I just don't know if Jokic has the ability to consistently guard the pick and roll. And that's a personnel issue. You can switch up schemes. You can switch up coverages, maybe go zone. But I do think that in the end, he has won a championship. I think he's a very good coach, and I trust him more than pretty much anyone on my list.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you guys having Malone up there. And obviously it's because you have the Nuggets as part of your top 5 teams.
Right.
You easily have, Mike Malone up. I would easily have Mike Malone very high up that totem pole as well, too, if I did have him as far as my top 5. I think it would be interesting because I look at the dynamic between Malone, and we may see it, right, in this upcoming playoffs. We could see a Rockets-Nuggets type matchup take place, right? And I would love to see the gamesmanship going on with a guy like Udoka, the stoic, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Don't play like a bitch, Malone, be like, you know what I'm saying? Stand on business with me, right? You know what I'm saying?
Right.
This is why I think I'm going to really enjoy this upcoming NBA's playoffs, because the matchups that I think could potentially be there. I know people are getting glossy-eyed with the star quality, but I really think people need to pay attention to who the players are going to be as far as the coaching for those teams and the matchups in there, because I think it's going to speak a lot about what kind of games we're going to see happen in those 7-game series. And that, to me, I would love to be able to have that conversation down the road when we actually get everything set, because I think it's going to make for not just great fodder for conversation, but also highlighting, what we're talking about, because it's easy when it's dominating teams, right? It's easy, like if a team is just completely just blowing everybody away and the talent, it speaks for itself. But it's another thing now when we bring all of these other nuances into the fold. And that's what it makes me want to, you know what I'm saying? Now listen, I don't care how bad the Knicks might be getting blasted. I'm going to still check the television and stuff, because I want to see what kind of facial expressions Tibbs has. And what facial expressions Missoula's got. Like, because we're going to have this conversation again, brother.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not looking forward to that conversation. It's going to be bad for the Knicks, but we can have it.
All right, so before we wrap, just everybody, one more time, just go through your Power 5 teams real quick. Josh, kind of start with you.
Yeah, 5, I have the Knicks. It's more out of just kind of like process of elimination for me. Don't really trust the Grizzlies or Rockets to put them up there. 4, I have the Nuggets. 3, I have the Cavs. 2, I have the Celtics. 1, I have the Thunder.
And for me, I have the Grizzlies. I got the Nuggets, the Celtics, the Cavs, and OKC in that reverse order. So OKC number 1. Cal?
And me, 5 Grizzlies, 4 Rockets, 3 Cavs, 2 Celtics, and number 1, the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Okay, Oklahoma City, reigning through our rankings here. So we'll see if Dagenhut and company are able to, live up to the potential building here. Great basketball team, great basketball city as well. And I'm really excited for the playoffs. But as we all know, this is always about matchups, and then they could get something that's not too sexy for them, and probably in that second round as well too. And that will challenge their inexperience, in the playoffs, especially if it's like a Nuggets team or something like that, could be really, really rough. But I can't wait. And Josh, you were an amazing guest. It took too long to get you on here. Hopefully this is the first of many shows to come with us here, joining you with the Dime as well too, brother. Thank you so much for joining us this week.
Well, thanks for having me on. Got to get you on the show as well. Would love to do so. Let's set it up. Thanks again. Good time.
Absolutely, man. Once again, our man, Josh Rodriguez, co-host of The Dime with Josh and Kawab. Be sure to check them out. They're available on all major platforms. 2-time nominated Sports Podcast Award Group nominee of Best Basketball Podcast. Josh Rodriguez joining us. This is The Baseline. Cal Lee Warren Shaw. Don't go anywhere. We're back. Cal Lee Warren Shaw, Baseline NBA Podcast. Man, what an awesome, awesome show. Having our man Josh Rodriguez on board. It's great when we actually have the opportunity to do these type of episodes when we're, like getting into a little bit of the power rankings, really kind of digging in more on the nuances of what makes these teams, as dominant as they are, put them where they are in their rankings, man. So it was really great to have them on board to kind of tap in and kind of get the pulse of what some of our colleagues and contemporaries feel as far as who they see as being the best teams in the NBA right now.
Yeah, Josh is an amazing dude. What he does with Quab as well, too. Great show, The Dime. They ended up following us, I think, over a year ago or so, too, when we both were nominated, both our respective shows nominated for the Best Basketball Podcast. And it's just great to be able to show love, to this community that is so vibrant and cares about the NBA and the way that it does. And as I was alluding to in our conversation, Josh is also a great producer with Volume, doing some amazing things with, I think, Colin Cowherd and Draymond Green and all of that stuff. So he's tapped in. It ain't a game over there, too. So it was amazing to kind of bring him onto our platform and have him share some of his knowledge, his Knick fandom as well, but not in a way that was biased in any way. I mean, he was really honest about where he thought that team stands. So great conversation with an amazing colleague. I can't wait for future collaborations with the Dime, man. This is what this is all about.
Absolutely. And once again, I want to sincerely apologize to our listeners. I had in no means wanted any of our guests to be offed by the references of the power names in order. It was just,
it fit. You were good.
You know what I'm saying? I just wanted to make sure. By no intentions are we, what do they call it? Spoiler alert. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're not trying to spoiler alert nobody, man. Our man Josh, once again, man, thank you so much. For our listeners, this is how we roll, baby, as we get a little bit closer. You know what I'm saying? Regular season is almost done, and then we got to start talking about playoffs. And then, Obviously, Sean, I got to get into some autopsy, and man, we got some things ready to pop off. You know what I'm saying? And so it's really an exciting time, man. And so as always, we appreciate you and yours for hopping on board with us this week for the Baseline. Cal Lee, Warren Shaw, we appreciate you guys. You know we do. And we'll catch up with you next time.